Hi, good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this Learn to Fly workshop and drop-in clinic brought to you this evening by Astral Aviation Consulting on behalf of the UK Civil Aviation Authority. If you want to stay in the loop with events and resources, please sign up to our mailing list, and you can go to our website, www.astralaviationconsulting.com, and Talitha has just put the link in the chat box for that as well. Signing up also gives you access to the replay of this workshop and a whole host of other safety resources. I've met some of you before in previous seminars. My name's Matt Lane. I'm Head of Training, an active single and multi-flight instructor and flight examiner. And this evening, it's great to be joined by Dave Lewins and Lily Ayres on the panel tonight as well. Dave's joining us from over in Gloucester. He's a freelance CPL and PPL helicopter instructor, and he's also a chief instructor and owner of his own fixed-wing PPL flying school, Eagle Flight Training, flying Diamond aircraft out of Gloucester, and does a lot of PPL and PPLH training and there as well. Lily began her aviation journey when she joined Southampton UAS before going on to join Draken Europe. And in parallel, Lily's won 3 flying scholarships, which allowed her to get her PPL. Lily's extremely passionate about promoting aviation careers and removing barriers for those wanting to join the industry. And she does a lot of great work with this as an ambassador for Elevate Her and committee member positions for the British Women's Pilots Association and on the Royal Aeros as well. So it's brilliant to have the spread of experience here with us tonight. Over the next 90 minutes, we're going to break the workshop down into a couple of easy digestible chunks. We're going to look at the PPL syllabus and how about getting a license. Some of the difficult bits with a bit of experience from Lily, which would be great to hear, and some top tips from some of us at both ends of the experience spectrum on how to progress to your licenses in the best way possible. We're also going to have Q&A at the end, and we really love to have your engagement and questions on that as well, and we'll get the panel to answer them. And if we can't answer them, or we don't have the answer to hand, we'll get the answer and get it back to you post the event. So please don't hold back on asking anything. Use the chat box, use the Q&A box, and that's a separate one to the chat box, just to remind you as well there as well. Talitha's just reminded you about that in the chat. But we can pick them up from both if you don't worry if you get stuck. To kick us off, we're just going to do a quick poll, and that's just to find out who's with us tonight, really. Some of you may be students, maybe thinking about flying, so just answer it best you can. It's not a pass or fail or anything like that. It's just to get you used to the polls that we'll use as we go through. So tell us what you mainly fly, or if you're a student and you're interested in learning to fly, tell us what type of flying you're intending to do or you're interested in doing. There's a whole range of things there. Some of you with us tonight may actually be already involved or already doing more than one. Just pick the one that you mainly do. And if we can have a look at the results, please, for that. So there we go. Most of you single engine piston and growing number of 3-axis microlights, which is great. It's a really growing aviation sector, and there's some really capable machines in the 600 kg category coming in the 3-axis microlights. So it's great to see some of you involved tonight. Brilliant. Thanks very much. I'm going to now pass over to Dave, who's going to talk about the syllabus and about some of the actual requirements of learning to fly, before we go on to Lily to talk about some of her experiences of actually doing it. Over to you, Dave.
Thanks very much indeed, and good evening all. I've got quite a lot of stuff to get through, so I will crack on, but obviously we'll start with a quick poll first. So just let's see where you all stand on this. Question: what's the maximum number of passengers allowed by the holder of a PPL? A3, B4, and C5, or D, unlikely, but perhaps 12 or more. It depends on the aircraft type rating. Hope I haven't led you there. So let's see, 3, 4, 5, or a load. I'll leave it for a couple of seconds. Okay, let's take a look at the results. Interesting. So a lot of you think 3. that will be the LAPL, the Light Aircraft Pilot's License. 4 or 5, some of you think, or perhaps 12 or more. You're actually right. So it actually isn't in the PPL. It's not listed by number. It depends entirely on the type rating. So, for example, you fly a Cessna Caravan, which is with parachutists, which is only about 3.5 tons. So it's within the 5,700 kilos you're allowed to fly under a PPL. But why is that relevant? Well, once you've got a PPL, it's very relevant that you've got an incredibly powerful license. It's internationally recognized. The LAPL, for example, you can only use in the UK, but the PPL gives you access to some seriously, some really serious flying around the world, including obviously multi-engined aircraft and instrument ratings. So thanks very much. You can remove the poll. We'll go on to the syllabus. I actually teach both aeroplanes and helicopters. I'm going to talk more mainly about the aeroplane PPL and mainly from a student point of view, and how about preparing for the skill test so that you can confidently show the examiner just how competent you are. Same goes for the helicopter students, but in terms of how you approach the course and the test. So have you got any helicopter specific subjects or questions, just pop them in the chat box and I'll deal with them later for you. I'm going to look at the differences then between LAPL and PPL, restrictions and the number of hours required, the syllabus, ground school, the RT license, the FRTOL, the skill test, the license skill test, currency requirements, and then what happens when you pass and what else you can do with it. So kicking off with the difference between the LAPL, as we call it, and the PPL. Choosing the type of license you want depends a lot on what you want to do with it. If you just want to fly for fun in the UK, when the weather's nice, otherwise not very often at all, then a LAPL might be the way forward. It's much more straightforward and cheaper to get a LAPL, and it's got a lot less stringent medical requirements. So if you can't get a Class 2 medical, a LAPL might actually be your only option. If you want to fly in cloud, though, you're hoping to get a commercial license perhaps one day, or fly multi-engine aircraft, might be worth going directly for a PPL, as it gives you a lot more options straight away. You can obviously upgrade later. If you start with a LAPL, you can upgrade then later to a PPL. Part FCL, flight crew licensing, on the CAA website. It's not it's not an easy place to plow through or navigate, but that's where you'll find all the licensing rules and regulations on their website. And they've recently developed an easy access rules for aircrew, which is what aircrew obviously need. And we're putting a link in the chat box for you directly so that you can jump straight into that if you like. Moving on to restrictions and the hours required. On the LAPL, you can only fly up to a maximum takeoff weight of 2 tons, a maximum of 3 passengers. So there you go, 4, including the pilot. 30 hours to do the course minimum, 6 hours solo only, of which 3 have got to be solo cross country. And the qualifying cross country for the LAPL is 80 miles with 1 land away. On the PPL side, you can go up to 5,700 kilos, so nearly 6 tons. You're not restricted on the number of passengers. That's restricted in a rating later on. You have to do 45 hours minimum training, 10 hours solo, of which 5 must be solo cross-country flying, at least. And then your qualifying cross-country is 150 miles and landings at 2 other airfields. For a helicopter, that's 100 miles with landings at 2 other airfields. Onto the syllabus. The way I personally think about the syllabus is by breaking it down into 3 phases, because when you look at that, it does look fairly overwhelming. And there's a lot of, you don't have to, for example, do exercise 1, then exercise 2, then exercise 3. You can dovetail them all together. And once you finish the whole course, obviously, you've got to have done all of them. The way I think of it are in 3 phases. Phase 1, mainly on learning to take off and land and some basic general handling up to your first solo. Usually takes about 20 hours, depending on the continuity and the weather. If you do it in the winter, you may take longer, obviously, because you can't fly as often. Phase 2, more advanced general handling exercises, and as I say, you can dovetail those into the pre-solo phase to keep you flying. So you can do, for example, advanced turning, steep turns as we call them in exercise 15. We could do that before solo, just to if the weather's not up to first solo, because you have to have fairly calm conditions to do your first solo. And once you've done first solo, then you can carry on. And then phase 3, which is really the operation of the aircraft. So up until then, you've just learned how to fly it, then you learn how to operate it, in particularly navigation. General navigation, radio navigation, including landways, and your qualifying cross-country solo. Probably that's the most rewarding part of the course, the one that we all look forward to. And in the PPL only, not the LAPL, there's also a single dedicated flight which teaches you how to fly on instruments using what we call foggles, which are basically foggy glasses to simulate cloud, or we have what's called a hood, so that you can learn the safe techniques just in case you accidentally do fly into cloud one day and have to know how to get out of it. All I'd say on the course and getting into the navigation phase is I would very strongly recommend that even before you even attempt navigation, you really do get to grips with the basics, attitude flying, trim in particular, and cockpit organization. Because if you can't fly accurately without thinking, a bit like driving down the road, changing gear without thinking about it or whatever, you'll find the navigation incredibly difficult. That said, navigation is the meat of day-to-day private flying, isn't it? Going to the other airfields for that expensive cup of tea and a sticky bun. But as I say, it's also the most demanding phase of the course, because the workload of managing your cockpit with maps and paperwork alongside flying like a god using the right techniques to hold heading, sights and speeds without thinking about that, and more on that later. You'll also study and practice radio nav using VORs and DMEs at a fairly basic level in VMC, so not in cloud, really just to show you how to use the equipment you've got in your aircraft. The detailed use of it in cloud is something you'll study later when you start proper instrument flying, doing an instrument rating or the IRR, as the first one can be. Moving on to the ground school, or theoretical knowledge, or TK as it's sometimes known. Both the LAPL and the PPL syllabi have the same 9 subjects. The top ones there we've listed as they're called common subjects, and they are, for example, the same exams for both aeroplane and helicopter. So air law, human performance, comms, nav, and MET. And then type specific, or procedures, AGK, flight planning and performance, and principles of flight. So, for example, if you're doing a conversion from one type to the other, like I did, for example, from aeroplanes to helicopters, you only need to take the 4 type-specific exams, not all of them again. Thank goodness. Don't underestimate the time it takes to get registered for those exams with your training organisation. I recommend highly you register as early as you can on the course. At the beginning of the course, first of all, you've got to go onto the CAA website, onto their personal portal, and once you've registered there, you'll get access to a section to choose and register your actual ATO or DTO, and from there you can also organise a medical on the personal portal as well while you're there. Get on with that early on. Timing wise, on the ground school side, once you've taken your first exam, passed your first exam, you've then got 18 months from the last day of the month of your first exam to pass the final 9th exam. And after that, you've still got another 24 months after you've passed that last one to pass the skill test and have your license issued. Okay, moving on to the Flight Radio Telephony Operator License, as we call it, the RT license. It's a practical test. Those of you that don't understand how it works, you're basically put into a room on your own with a laptop and a mouse and a headset, and the examiner sits in a nearby room with his equipment, and he's air traffic control, And he replies to you, giving you clearances while you fly a preset route on the computer from engine start to shutdown. And you've got to make all the appropriate radio calls, transiting controlled airspace, or making mayday calls or mayday relays or whatever, in the manner laid down in CAP 413, the RT Bible. We're going to put a link into CAP 413 into the chat for you now. My advice on the RT license would be ask your school which local examiner they recommend. You may have one actually on your airport. Book the test early and do prepare well. Don't underestimate it. There are some good commercial resources online, but your school probably offers ground school and practice sessions to help you pass first time. If not, then go online and see what you can find. Onto the skill test. Once you've done your qualifying cross-country solos, you've done plenty of revision, then you need to start preparing for the skill test. That means going back into the earlier books, earlier exercises, and remember what they were all about, how you fly turns and steep turns and stalls and recovery techniques, etc. And also prepare by understanding exactly what the examiner's looking for. Try and put yourself in their shoes. They'll assume you're ready for the test, and they really will want you to pass. But they are there, bear in mind, to certify to the CAA. They're confident that you're competent and that you've got the skills, the awareness, the decision making, the judgment. You need to exercise the privileges of the licenses, both on that one sortie, through questioning your knowledge of the rules, the technical aspects of the aircraft and the procedures on the ground, in the brief and in the debrief, and of course in the air. So in a nutshell, on the day, the examiner completes the tick box of questions they decide to ask you, and the exercises they've asked you to fly, taken from a list of the possibilities on their form. So I'm going to put a form on the chat box for you now, which is the examiner report for the PPLA skill test at least. And if you want a helicopter one, then let me know and I can get you one of those as well. So going into it, it's based on 5 sections. Section 1, pre-flight operations and departure. So obviously this is the brief. She will look at pre-flight documentation. That's all the aircraft documents and insurance details, and checking you understand them all. Because obviously once you're on your own, then you've got to check them all for yourself. So he wants to know you can do that. And then obviously the NOTAM and the weather briefing, that you understand them and you are taking care of them. Mass and balance and performance calculations, the check A, the start, after start, taxiing, takeoff, departure and climb out. It'll be looking at your accuracy, your radio and general awareness of procedures, and your awareness of the aircraft that are around the airfield that might affect you. Then general air work, climbing, descending, medium level, turning and steep turns, various stalling exercise, looking at your use of the Hazel checks, for example, and stall recovery techniques, minimum height loss, and general awareness and your use of the threat and error management that you'll have been taught to use throughout the course, especially while the aircraft's in an unusual state, like you're stalling, for example. Then en route procedures, where it starts with the nav usually, is your heading hold, double the drift at the halfway point, updating your ETA, and using the standard closing angle techniques. Includes the use of the flight plan, the PLOG as we call it, the pilot log, and then looking at how you use dead reckoning, that's deduced reckoning, and map reading, how you actually can interpret the map and how it looks on the ground from the map, seeing how accurately you're holding a heading, altitude and speed, because otherwise you're going to get lost quickly, your general orientation, timing, revision of the ETAs, fuel updates at each turning point, very important. It's very easy to say, well, we're getting airborne with 3 hours of fuel, and then you do a cursory Frida check and you don't actually call it out. So certainly on what we teach is that you plan how much fuel you expect at a turning point based on how much you took off with, and then how much is the minimum fuel that you need from that point to continue the route. Otherwise, you're going to be turning back, cutting off a bit if, for instance, the wind's been stronger, or you're just burning more for whatever reason. You might have forgotten to lean or something. He'll also look at your log keeping, the intention of that, and it's much more important at CPL level. But the intention is that they could refly the route from the plog after the flight. So they're looking for you updating ETAs as you get to each turning point. You'll be asked at some point to initiate a diversion to an alternate, and really it's just the planning and implementation, usually an initial heading, the timing you think it's going to take, and the ETA and the fuel planning, and then just overall looking at your general flight management and RT procedures. Section 4, en route and landing, approach and landing procedures, covers the arrival procedure, and then they'll give you a choice of various circuits, maybe a short field landing if possible, a crosswind landing if you've got suitable conditions. You might see a poor weather circuit, sometimes called a low level circuit, flapless circuit to touch and go, glide to touch and go, or perhaps to land, and probably a go around from a low height as well. So as I say, landing or touch and goes. So quite a lot there they can throw in, and then through the flight they can throw in abnormal or emergency procedures. For example, after takeoff, and probably you're more likely to do this not right off the bat immediately. That would be pretty harsh. But in one of the circuits, you'll be glad to hear, usually they have to announce a practice fan stop, as it's called, engine failure after takeoff, so that they can't just chop the throttle. But I gather that some people still do that. Matt might correct me on that. Simulated forced landings and other various simulated emergencies. They can call out various lights or low fuel or the alternator or whatever. And usually without warning, a bit like you get an emergency stop on your driving test. They'll just throw something at you and see how you handle it. If it's you can always ask, is this a simulated emergency, obviously. So that's the skill test. Do prepare for it. Moving on to currency requirements for the 2 licenses. I won't bother reading all of this out because obviously time's pressing, but you can see that for the LAPL, there's what's called a rolling validity. So firstly, the LAPL isn't like a PPL because it doesn't contain ratings that you need to revalidate or renew. The license itself is both the rating and the license, and its validity is maintained just by recency. And as I say, that's called a rolling validity. And you've obviously got to keep an eye on your currency. So in the last 2 years, there's the list on the LAPL, and you can also, apart from the, you can either do number 1 there or 2. So you can take a proficiency check with an examiner, and that supersedes all the others. PPL, SEP class rating, SEP valid for 24 months and revalidation by proficiency check, blah, 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 as you can see there. And again, you can do refresher training of at least an hour total. So it says an hour of total flight time with an instructor. That doesn't have to be in the same sortie. That can be cumulative over the year. So moving on to what happens when you pass. So once you passed and you get your shiny new license from the CAA, now you can take your friends and family flying on your own, and that's obviously the day you've been waiting for. You might be surprised, though, that quite a number of new pilots drop out of flying altogether in their first year after getting the licenses. Why? Probably because they just lose the challenges they had on the course, because the course is a pretty full-on test all the way through, and there's an awful lot to learn. Obviously, once you get the license, it's very tempting to continue to do exactly what you're used to doing. For instance, at Gloucester, you might fly to Shobden and back, go and have a cup of tea over there and come back, or Kemble or Wellesbourne, and never go further afield. So my strong advice would be to keep your interest and skills up to date and developing. So get to know your GPS and your personal devices. You might have Sky Demon, ForeFlight, or Runway HD or whatever. or your Garmin's in the cockpit. Get to know them, preferably with an instructor, but there are loads of videos on the help systems that are very helpful. Go further afield. I would suggest you talk to other experienced club members where they go, even go with them. You might even sit in the back if they've got full front seats and just watch and learn. You'll definitely learn doing that. Stay current and keep up to date with the safety sense leaflets, for example, from the CAA. They're very, very useful, very informative, and they're all available on the CAA and our Astral website as well. Keep yourself challenged. There's loads of ratings and different courses you can do. Night, instrument, the full instrument rating or a restricted one, the aerobatic rating, the multi-engine rating. You could even do an instructor rating on a PPL once you've got a certain number of hours. Don't need a CPL to do that. And then try and fly more complex aircraft. So you might need to do differences training, but it will definitely keep your interest up. Retractable undercarriage, for example, you might be flying PA-28s, but perhaps go to the Arrow. That's got retractable and variable pitch propellers. You might like a glass cockpit, a tailwheel aircraft, or a turbocharged engine. So that's my my strong suggestion. Once you've got your PPL, then keep your levels up. Back to you, Matt. Thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dave, for that. Now, Dave has done a sterling job there, because some of you may be thinking, oh, crikey, this is all rules and regulations and, oh, lots to take in, and, oh, crikey, this is all very complex and all the rest of it. And that's because the reality is it is complex. There is lots of rules and regulations, lots of information, lots of new things to learn when you learn to fly. But don't be phased by it. Dave's tried to break it down into some kind of building blocks and chunks there. But that's what learning to fly in the course is all about, and your school and instructor will take you through all this. You won't be expected to know any of this very quickly or before you start learning. This is all things that you've got to learn to build up to that skills test that Dave talked about there as well. So don't worry if it seems complex, and like I say, it is, but your school will take you through it. Dave, we did have one question from Lliy as well as we went through that section, but we'll worth picking up now. It's about the foggles, the use of the foggles. So the foggles, if people don't know what they are, they're like a hood or some almost like safety goggles where part of them is frosted so that it simulates you being in cloud. So it cuts off part of your vision so that the top half of it looks as if you're looking at cloud, and it just allows you to see the instrument panel so you can fly instruments. The foggles are used for simulating flying in cloud. So as part of the PPL course there, you may need to simulate flying in cloud to practice that bit of it as well. It's not part of the LAPL course, but it's part of the PPL course. So that's what the foggles or a hood, it's a very similar device, are used for in you to answer that as well. And Dave, is that the same in the helicopter world?
Yeah, it's exactly the same in the helicopter world. We tend to use foggles rather than the hood. It's just slightly less disorientating. But we use exactly the same. I've also, Matt, just seen another question that's popped up. If you want me to pick that up now.
Yes, please. Yeah, let's do that now while it's relevant.
This is from, I can't see the name, IM, whoever IM is, welcome. Another one.
It's Lliy again, actually.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yes, yes, thank you.
I can't see that. If I want to make the transition from fixed wing to helicopter, how would I go about that? Exactly as I did. So you go to a helicopter school with your license, you get credited by 10% of your fixed wing hours up to a maximum of 6 hours, a massive 6. So you'll do a PPL in 39 instead of 45 hours, assuming that you're good enough in 39 hours. And then you have to do those 4 type specific exams, and then go ahead and do the skill test, and that's it.
Brilliant, thank you. And there's one more question. There's one question that's coming about instrument ratings we'll take at the end, but somebody's just asked about the proposed CA licensing changes. Some of you may know the consultation just ended on the 22nd of May, and the CA have put out a big program and a consultation, and they're looking at simplifying a lot of the licensing. Now we've left the European, the ARSA system. We have the ability to actually simplify and change some of the UK FCL regulations that Dave mentioned earlier as well. The CA looking to do that. There's a lot of legacy licenses out there as well. So right now, and Dave probably sees this as well, if somebody walks into one of my flying clubs, they could have one of about 16 different license and medical combinations that are all perfectly legal and perfectly good to go solo, but it's quite a complex system, and there's a lot of duplication, and there's some differences between old UK, old EASA licenses and that, and the CA are looking to simplify some of these and also expand some of the abilities to hold different ratings on different licenses as well. So personally, I'm fully supportive of this. I think the industry is very supportive of the work that the CA are proposing to do on this as well. And I think it will be a very good move for schools, students and pilots when some of this comes in. So I very much welcome it. And Dave, I think you see the same in a school environment from the helicopter world as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you've got any more specific questions on that, we can try and pick it up at the end as well. Another few questions coming in, we'll pick up at the end as well. But without further ado, I'd like to move on to Lily. I'm going to give Lily a chance to have a chat to us as well. Lily, over to you. And I think you've got a poll to kick you off, Lily.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, we are, as always, going to start with a quick poll. So the question is, what is the medical requirement for a PPL student to go solo? Class 2 medical, personal medical declaration, no medical required until skills test, or LAPL medical. So we'll leave that up for a few seconds. And then we'll get the answer. Okay, so yeah, majority of people picked the right answer there. So the correct answer was, of course, A. Students on a UK Part FCL PPL course must hold a Class 2 medical for solo flight. A personal medical declaration can only be used post-license issue. So most people got it there, which is good. I do think it's easier to try and get the medical out the way sooner rather than later. I think I got mine before I actually started the training for my PPL. It's just one less thing to worry about. So I'm going to kick off this section by running through some of the things that I personally struggle with still now as a new PPL holder, and some of the things that I struggled with during my flight training. So for a bit of background, I got my license last August. I passed my skills test on the 17th, which was my birthday, for anyone who was wondering, which was a very, very good birthday. Best one yet, I would say. I started learning to fly on Southampton University Air Squadron, and then properly started my training for my private pilot's license in late 2021. And if anyone's done this whilst working full time, it is not easy. It was a struggle, and my school actually closed halfway through my training, which was quite disruptive. But I had a really great support network, and I found the instructors really knowledgeable and patient. But like anything in life, it was tough, and it certainly was not all plain sailing. So I'm going to run through the key things that I struggled with. So I picked out to cover here today navigation, circuits, and steep turns. So we'll go through each one of those, and we'll start off with navigation. So I found navigation particularly difficult, I think, because I personally didn't have any dedicated ground school for navigation. And I think learning the topic of navigation solely in the air is quite expensive for a start. I can't afford that. And it's also really challenging. It's a really high workload environment, as Dave's already spoken about. So it's good to try and get as much of that sorted and squared away on the ground as you can. So I used a lot of books and asked questions here and there to try and get to grips with the topic. But it is a massive topic. And in hindsight, I probably should have asked for some more time with an instructor on the ground. And I probably would have found the whole thing a bit easier, because it did really stress me out trying to learn and master navigation. So to make this easier, I tried to learn the art of planning as much as possible on the ground in order to make the whole flight run smoother. And I think the more I prepared, the more confident I felt in the air as well. So this included, for me, using a diversion plotter, especially for the diversion portion that Dave's spoken about, which comes up in the skills test. I just am not very good at mental maths whilst dealing with loads of other things whilst flying. So for me, the diversion plotter was really useful. In addition to that, I just tried to make sure I had really good awareness of VRPs on the route, so visual reference points on the route, so that I could keep a really good situational awareness, and tried to get really confident with completing plogs as well, which we've spoken a little bit about. If I did a plog that I thought worked particularly well, I would keep hold of it. I think my flight bag actually towards the end of my training was just full of plogs, just different ones that had worked well and wanted to come back and reflect on those. So I always tried to keep hold of the ones that worked well. Now that I've passed, I would say I probably still don't feel very confident with navigation, and I think that's okay and that's normal as a new PPL holder. I think you're still building your confidence and still going out your comfort zone when you're going to new places and going to new airfields, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's a topic that you ultimately need to keep refreshing yourself on to stay current. And now that we've got so many different electronic aids to use during flying, like SkyDemon, ForeFlight, etc., it's really easy to become reliant on those and to sort of move away from the more traditional navigation techniques. So moving forward, I want to try and continue to read up and understand nav and continue to develop my understanding, basically. Next up is circuits. So I think a lot of people probably agree on this one. It is challenging. I found circuits difficult because I think for me they were slightly different to the circuits I had learnt to do on the University Air Squadron. So just slightly different shape pattern in the circuit. And then I developed a bit of like a mental block with landing as well, which was really unhelpful. So the whole way around the circuit, I would have no problems really. And then as soon as I was on final, I was sort of already psyching myself out and telling myself that it was all going to go horribly wrong. I had a few sorties in the circuit before my first solo leading up to it. And my instructor and I both knew that the next milestone for me to hit was going to be that big first solo. And I think he could tell I was getting pretty frustrated. So he actually put me with a different instructor, just to have a change of scene, fresh pair of eyes, try and see if he could offer me any hints, tips or tricks with landing that I might have been missing. And one trip later, I actually did my first solo after that. So I think it was just that differing perspective that I needed to give me that push. And it was definitely the thing that helped me unlock my potential ultimately, I think, which was good. And now that I've passed and reflecting on that experience, I know that now that we're flying, and particularly in the circuit where it's busy, there's so much room for error. And if something doesn't go your way, it's really important to not dwell on it. And I'm still guilty of this with a lot of things, but particularly with flying, you've really got to try and lock it away and move on to the next thing that you're meant to be working on. And I think that's definitely what happened to me, especially with landing. So if something didn't go right on the first go, I then told myself that I wasn't good at it, and I dwell on it basically for far too long. So when something doesn't go very well, learn from it, move on, and come to the next challenge or the next task or the next thing on your checklist or whatever it is you're doing with a fresh pair of eyes and a positive attitude. And sometimes flying with someone else, with a different instructor, can actually be the thing that you need to help you see that actually you are good enough and you can progress. And then finally, my top three is steep turns. So I think I found this part of the training difficult because for me, I found it quite unnatural. And I think I could have done with a bit more trying to understand the significance and importance of steep turns. I was finding it really tough to get the aircraft all the way to 45 degrees angle of bank and hold it there. And I was finding it tough to maintain my height as well during the turn. So you tend to lose quite a bit of height during a steep turn. To make this easier, I tried talking through it with my instructor as much as I could on the ground. And I think because I love a good process, I'm a very process orientated person, I tried to make myself a checklist for entry into the turn, maintaining it. And I actually did this for quite a lot of things during the syllabus, just making myself like a mini checklist of all the steps that I need to do for each different thing during the handling. And now that I've passed and reflecting on that, I think I wish I'd practiced steep turns a bit more before my test because I still didn't feel really confident in that portion of the test. The syllabus is really big that it can be tough to stay current and consistent on things like that. And my instructor and I would often practice the big ticket items like PFLs and nav and stalls. But I think steep turns probably could have got a bit more attention in reflection. So that is my top 3 things that I found difficult. I'm sure some of you can maybe relate to those. And it's back over to you, Matt.
Brilliant, Lily. That was amazing. That's really great to hear that lived experience of that as well. There's a couple of questions that have popped up as we've gone through. Don't want to put you on the spot, Lily, but how long can you remember how many hours you took when you got your actually passed your PPL? Can you remember roughly?
Yeah, so I passed my PPL in 48 hours.
There you go. So anywhere that's which is good going. Anywhere up to in around the 50-60 mark, I find is quite common. Dave, I think we would agree is fairly common as well there. So some people are asking how long is it common to pass as well. Yes, it is possible to do it in the minimum hours, but that's basically if you get real consolidated flying, very good weather, no tech issues, no traffic at the airfield, you generally have to be quite lucky to pass in the minimums. Most people that take a little bit longer, it's because they get delays because of weather or they need to refly elements. Sometimes if you're teaching at a busy airfield, you can go up and do an hour and a bit of circuits and only get a few landings in if you happen to hit really bad traffic unexpectedly. So those are normally reasons why things take longer than normal to qualify. It's not a reflection on the student, I would say, at all of this as well. Dave as well, Anton's asked, is 61 too old to start? I would say definitely not, Dave. I would
100% not. No, 100% not. Go for it. That's what you want to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, we get students of all ages, all backgrounds, and everybody can learn to fly. It's all about getting the right approach and getting a school that works for you, and an instructor that works for you as well. Getting somebody who can adopt the right learning approach to you there as well.
I've actually got a 74-year-old student at the moment, and yeah, we've been working together now for the last 6 or 9 months, and she's going through it. It's impressive.
Brilliant. Excellent to hear. Excellent to hear. And the other question I'd like to pick up, as it's relevant here, is some people have asked about the most practical, the way to revise the practical side of flying as well, especially if you don't get too many chances to fly because of money or work or family pressures or things like that. Dave, do you know what chair flying is? Can you explain to us what chair flying is? I'm sure you did it in your career.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not only in the chair, it's in the bath and everywhere else.
Yeah.
I would, exactly as Lily suggested about writing checklists, I really like that. I'm extremely process orientated as well. And you can learn the process to build the muscle memory by using your checklist. Clearly, once you've done it a few times, then it will become natural. But especially on the radio as well, I have all my students write down all their calls that they have to make, and then we practice what the replies are likely to be. And then once they've read it 2 or 3 or 4 times, then they obviously won't need to do it again. But the students that try and remember it, they struggle a lot more trying to remember it. And of course, they also run the risk of taking a long time or getting it wrong, and someone else is trying to make a landing call, for example. So I do recommend the Lily's checklist idea. I think it's a really good idea. An armchair flying. So you take your checklist to your armchair, sit in it, and practice your drills. What drills are you going to do after takeoff? In my aircraft, we bring the blue lever back, we bring the flaps up, and we turn the landing light off. Then we're looking for this speed. Then we're going to turn. We're going to turn at this much bank, and we're clean now, so we've got to lift the nose and write all of that down. So you really understand the process, so that once you then do the next flight, you can rattle it off. So that's what we mean by armchair flying.
And I can recommend it to you if there's any of you out there at schools, or if you fancy designing one on in your patio or in your garden. Now, if you go to Middle Wallop, in the hangar there, they've got painted on the hangar floor a circuit pattern, and their students, when they're not flying or when the weather's bad, they can actually walk around the circuit on the hangar floor and talk about imagining what power settings they're going to use and where they're going to level off and what radio calls they're going to do. And they can actually walk around it in a big painted circuit and runway actually on the hangar floor at Middle Wallop. And I totally commend it. So if you want to modify your garden or your garage floor, go ahead there as well. So anyway, let's move on to some top tips. We've got 5 Dave's going to quickly run through, and then 5 from Lily as well, just to put this together. Dave, oh no, we've got a poll first.
Yeah, we've got a poll. Yeah, I'll move straight in. Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
So it's a poll. There's no actual answer to this one, or right answer at least. We're interested to know. So what specific skill on your course do you find the most challenging to master? A, flying accurate circuits, B, steep turns, C, planning and performance calculations, and D, probably in a lot of my students' cases, holding heading, height and speed in navigation while managing the navigation and radios. So have a think about those.
And if you haven't got to the course, just what do you think would be the challenge? Just give us what you think would be a challenge to you.
Yeah. Okay, let's pull up the results. Yeah, very interesting. So what would I say about that? Planning and performance calculations, clearly that's a practice thing. I would sit with your instructor and go through it a different way. In other words, if you're not getting it, then he needs to say it in a different way, perhaps drawing diagrams for you. Some people, a lot of people learn differently. Some people are numbers based, some people are diagrams based. So if you're not getting it first time, then definitely maybe ask even a different instructor. There's a lot of YouTube on planning and performance calculations, but it's obviously very important for you to get it. Flying circuits and steep turns, that is absolutely practice, which takes us on to holding heading, height and speed in navigation, because actually, if you can fly a really accurate circuit, it means that you are able to fly without thinking about holding your heading, height and speed. If all the way downwind you're up and down or left and right, you really do need to go back to basics. And if you find that you're starting in the circuit too early in the course, again, that can be detrimental. You really, really need to be able to fly very accurate, straight and level, hands off, nicely in trim, and fly level 30-degree bank turns, for example, rolling out on a heading, making sure that you're still at the right speed. So once you can do that and you can fly accurate circuits, you'll be surprised how that muscle memory sticks with you, and then you'll find navigation much easier. So I suggest if you are struggling with that, then make sure you can do the basics. So you can close that. Thanks very much. That was very interesting. And if you've got any more questions for that around that subject, bang them in the chat box or the questions box. So these are my 5 top tips. Preparation, writing down your checks, thinking it through from start to finish. Obviously, the better you prepare, the more smoothly your flight's going to run and the more confidence you'll have knowing you've covered everything. And that's a great part of the process, which will apply to all your future flights. I do a lot of aerial photography. I have to prepare those very quickly, but I've got a process, and I actually keep my process written down on my phone in notes, and I literally work through it to make sure I haven't forgotten anything. So it's not just, we can't just jump in an aircraft and however experienced we are and expect to just get on with it. We've really got to make sure that we're covering everything. The content of each specific exercise on the course is obviously covered in your. You should have a student study guide in your school, or you might just use the APMs or the AFE flight guides. But do read those before before every flight. And just read up the next exercises, the next few as well, bearing in mind that the weather on the day just may mean that you can't do what you thought you were going to be doing. So the further you can read ahead without getting too far ahead, because you'll be losing the you won't have developed the knowledge before you get on. So don't read too far ahead, but definitely read a few exercises ahead. And leading up to first solo, or in the early exercises, I always recommend my students read up to and including first solo, so that they understand what they're going towards. And bear in mind that in those early exercises of climbing, descending, turning, is all that's all put together in the circuit. So you know, you turn, you take off, you turn, you climb, you level out, you turn again, you do checks, etc., etc. So really nail those early exercises, and then the circuits, if they're not right, ask to go back again, or make sure in the debrief you understand what you're getting wrong. So that's all about preparation. There's also in the Skyway Code, there's really excellent guidance on preparation and flight planning. I recommend my students read it cover to cover, just for reference, not to remember it all, but just to realize where to find everything that's in there as a reference document. Fly often. Obviously, the more continuity you get, the quicker you'll build your muscle memory and your habits. As simple as that. But as Matt very well suggested, do practice at home, in the car, in the bath, wherever you are. The car's a good one. While you're driving, just run through your checks. That's useful. I mean, yes, we use checklists, but certain drills do require a memory action. Know your aircraft. Read the flight manual cover to cover. You certainly need to do that before the skill test, because you're expected to know your aircraft pretty well, especially the systems and the checklists, and ask your instructor to go through those if there are any areas that don't make sense. I'd also, on that, I would say a lot of people, is a bit of a bugbear of mine. I don't really want to get on a soapbox. But in terms of the ground school, a lot of students come to me asking, well, yeah, but what's the question on it? In other words, they want to learn the questions and learn the answers. That really, really, really isn't what it's about. You really do need to understand it, so that whatever question they ask you on it, you'll be able to work it out logically. So try and understand while you're doing the ground school, rather than just passing the exam and forgetting it. Try to write yourself a logic process of why a system works, for example. Fly attitudes. That's not about I don't like your attitude. It's quite simply the attitude in relation to the horizon. You're taught how and why we fly pitch attitudes. We set the horizon in a certain place in the cockpit, and it works. The point is, it works. If you need to change your speed, you fly a new attitude. If you want to fly a level turn, you set an attitude, hold it, don't chase the needles. You then adjust the back pressure, for example, that you got by a bit, and see what happens while you get it getting on with your lookout. So just make sure you're flying an attitude. You can actually, if you become aware, as you become aware of it, you'll realize that you're actually pumping the stick, and it's very poor technique. It doesn't work, and it's also very uncomfortable for passengers. You might have driven with people that drive like that. It's not good. And then learning from your mistakes. Lily, you made a really good point. Thank you. I have students that beat themselves up every time they make a mistake, which is laudable in that they really want to do well. But please, as Lily said, if anything goes wrong, forget it. It just doesn't matter. Learn from it. Try not to make the same mistake again. But there's no point in maybe apologizing or just worrying about it. And that's especially true in the skill test. If you make a mistake, definitely forget about it. Don't think, oh my goodness, I failed. You just have to get on with it, because the examiner will take a view, assuming you don't crash, of course. So they're my main 5, and they are, I do think they're good. So over to you, Lily, from a student perspective.
Great, thank you. So my top 5, starting out strong with the one that we've probably spoken about the most throughout this session, which is study and preparation. And I think this really has got to be the most important aspect from my perspective, as Dave's spoken about already. I think the more preparation you do, ultimately, the more you're going to get out of your time in the air. And I think, as we can all agree, flying training is very expensive for the average person. And sometimes making sure you go the extra mile with your prep on the ground is going to increase your chances of getting it right in the air, which means you aren't doing things airborne that you could be running through, or even armchair flying, as we've already spoken about, on the ground for free. Secondly, don't be afraid to ask questions or ask for help. I think I definitely was guilty of this during my training. And it's really easy to forget sometimes that you are doing this course and you're doing this training to learn. You're not expected to rock up to the flying school and know absolutely everything and know all the answers. You are there to learn, and you will stand a much better chance of succeeding if you are asking the right questions, instead of not being sure and then getting to your skills test and actually you're still not sure, which is really not the time to not be sure. The next one on here, so number 3 from mine, is positive mental attitude, which I've already spoken a little bit about, making sure you don't dwell on things. I really think that your attitude should not be underestimated. I really do believe that performance can be linked to your attitude and the way that you think about things, and your ability to learn from a mistake, but don't let your mistakes get the better of you. Don't let them define you. This is obviously much easier said than done, and I think this is something that I'm still learning to master. And it can be really tough, especially when you're trying to build your confidence and your skill in something that you're really passionate about, like flying. So yeah, that's definitely an important one for me. And then number 4 is find some methods that work for you. Dave's already mentioned it already briefly, but not everyone's going to learn in the same way. Not everyone's going to approach things the same, and everyone has got different strengths and weaknesses and learning styles, and it's important to find what's going to work best for you as an individual. So from my perspective, I'm really not very strong at maths. I'll be the first one to admit that. And as I mentioned, I think I wanted to find a way to make the maths portion of the PPL easier. So one way I did that was using a diversion plotter, and again, just really making sure that I went the extra mile with the planning on the ground, so that ultimately the maths was easier for me or reduced in the air. So I found that really helpful. And then lastly, and very importantly, is help your fellow students and people in your network. I asked for help from so many people, and I still ask for help from a lot of people now, during my training especially. But I found that there are so many tips and tricks out there that you can learn, and I can almost guarantee that if you're finding something tough, there's probably someone out there as well who's also found it tough before you and will have some knowledge that can help you. I think if you can't find any good resources, tutorials, or guidance on something, then make them, create them for someone else, and you'll learn so much from doing that as well. You'll become really confident in that topic. Just gives you a really good opportunity to further your understanding and support other students as well who might need it on their journey too. Aviation's a fantastic community, as I'm sure we can all agree, and you just never know when you might need someone's help, or equally when they might need yours at some point in the future too. So back over to you again, Matt.
Brilliant, thanks, Lliy. And I think the maths things come up in some of the questions we've had as well. I think it's important to remember that we're not trying to do a maths degree in the air, and some students do worry about this and try and turn the whole thing into a bit of a science project. Certainly as instructors and examiners, all we're looking for is that you can apply an appropriate degree of mental maths to some of this things. So take the diversion, for example. As an examiner, I'm just looking that you can give me a heading and then wind correct it. That's kind of fairly reasonable. It doesn't, I don't matter whether you give me, 108 or 112, doesn't really matter. But if you're heading approximately east and that's the direction you're going, and you think you're going to get there in about 30 minutes and you kind of update that to 14, 15 minutes, that's great. It doesn't have to be perfect. And I think you know, everything we do is based on forecast winds and, you know, flying speeds. You know, things change all the time in flying, so you will never be 100% accurate. So don't get wrapped up around it. And I think that's true to say, Dave, isn't it? I think sometimes students worry about trying for too much accuracy in some of these things.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, accuracy is all very well when you're trying to hold a heading, and of course you made a good point there about the fact that you're planning based on a forecast wind. So people don't really get the idea, for example, that a heading hold is simply to actually test what the wind really is. It might be forecast to be something, but actually it's slightly more southerly or stronger or whatever. So you are going to get drift. So you shouldn't be trying to correct yourself on a heading hold. There you do need to fly accurately, otherwise the system doesn't work. But yeah, certainly for what I teach on the diversion side is take a look at your actual map and the route that you've got, and then use the most appropriate one that is likely to be equivalent to the direction of a diversion. You can take it straight off the map and use your fingers to march across the map in terms of time from a leg you've already planned. So that works well.
Great. And what we'll do is we'll now move into Q&A, and because we've got some Q&A coming in, which is great to see. We had one earlier on about air sickness from Rachel, and Rachel asked, she said she's had a few trial lessons, but she's worried about starting to feel sick when getting into some of the more advanced maneuvers. Lily, is air sickness something you've ever struggled with? Have you ever faced that at all?
No, I personally have not experienced that. I did quite a lot of aerobatics early on the University Air Squadron, which I think just got all the air sickness out, which was quite lucky. No, I'm trying to think if I know of anyone who has experienced something similar. Sometimes people say that even changing from a low wing to a high wing aircraft can help because it gives you a better view of the horizon, which can reduce your symptoms if you're feeling quite unwell. I know there are patches you can put on as well for sickness, but I personally have not experienced that. But I know that there should be quite a lot of tips and tricks online to figure out how to overcome that.
Yeah, and from my experience, Dave, I'll ask Dave to add to it in a minute, but with air sickness, most of it is about nerves. So as you progress through the course, you know what's happening, you know what's coming next, you know what you're doing. Those nerves and your confidence builds, your nerves diminish, and a lot of air sickness is related to nerves. So once you get over and get into the course, that doesn't become a factor. Also, the other thing that I find is a lot of people avoid eating and drinking, because they think that's going to make them more sick in the air. I've actually had a student faint on me because they'd avoided eating and drinking, and this was a trip late in the day as well. I can honestly say to you that you need to be well nourished before flying. You need to have had, you know, a good breakfast or a good lunch, have had water and had something to eat, and sometimes even a sugary small chocolate bar or something before flying if you're using up a lot of energy. Actually, having that nutrition before going flying is actually really important, and it will prevent you being sick, not make you sick. Trust me on that. Dave, I'm sure you've had experience of that as well.
I have actually. I've not made myself sick, but I've certainly been made to feel sick. I actually ended up doing a desensitization course in the Air Force because when we started getting onto instrument flying, I found it very disorientating. I've always been airsick and car sick and seasick, and I love sailing and I love flying. I've never let it stop me.
Yeah.
But it was mainly in the Air Force when I was an instructor with students that I'm teaching air combat or whatever. That is, or sitting through somebody's aerobatic sequence. I've never enjoyed that. So I've avoided those kind of things. But the other thing is that if you then ask to take control for a while, then it really can make you feel an awful lot better. So I would recommend that. But I definitely agree with you about the eating bit. You definitely are better off if you've eaten than not.
Excellent. Anton asked as well, what's a good rate to take lessons? Once a month, once a week, once a day? Now, my quick answer on this, and I'll ask Dave as a school owner as well on this. Ideally, you know, the more continuity you can get, the better. But we fully accept as instructors and schools that life challenges and finances make that difficult. An ideal to aim for, I think, is once a week, once a fortnight, if you can afford that. That's really a good rate to aim at as well. Bear in mind as well, some of your booked lessons will get cancelled because of weather and other issues. Dave, I don't know what you recommend with your school students.
I think once a week is great. Helicopters are incredibly expensive, often twice as expensive per hour as an airplane. And some people that can afford it can take a month off, save up, take a month off, and then come and try and cram it all into a month, which people have done, and it works. It does work. It actually saves you money in the long run. But you have to be able to take a month off, for example. So I tend the average would be once a week. I'd recommend once a fortnight tops. Some people that come in once every 3 or 4 weeks, it's really not great, because you're spending all that first half of the flight relearning what you wrote, what you forgotten from the last flight. I also, I personally have an online system of reports. So each flight, I write up the training report, and the students have access to that. I highly recommend, if you have access to your online reports, or you can just go in and read your reports or photograph them, whatever. They are effectively yours and the school's. They're very useful if the instructor has written up a good for your benefit, what you're best to study for the next time. When I did my PPL, I did it on a flying scholarship, but we did the whole course in 3 weeks. All 4 of us went through the course, and we went solo in a few days. But then we were literally flying 5 or 6 times a day, which is absolutely full on, but it can be done. We recently had a girl come through. I say a girl, she was a teenager, came through the helicopter school about a year ago, and she did the entire course, 45 hours in 3 weeks. That's going some. She's now flying commercially. She's very good. But having taken the time off, done a lot of she was clearly very motivated, and she wasn't really treating it like a hobby, but she really wanted to do it. So it can be done, and if you can give yourself that time, then I'd highly recommend it.
Brilliant, thank you, Dave. Lily, we've got somebody's asking, would you recommend the use of home simulators, Microsoft Flight Simulator, etc., to practice nav? Have you ever used any simulators or anything in your training? I don't know if that's something you've had experience with.
I personally haven't. What I did in preparation for my skills test, which some people might think is a bit silly on reflection, I went on Google Earth and looked up the like some of the VRPs around the area that I thought the nav route was going to be in, and just tried to really familiarize myself with those, so I could try and gauge how far off track I might be if I see this VRP, or how do I know if I'm halfway, or it's when I get to that lake, or just little things like that. I haven't used flight simulators to prepare for nav. No, I haven't used them all that much, actually.
So yeah, but I totally agree. Using Google Earth and that to look at VRPs, looking at airfield joins as well, if you're going to other airfields, is really valuable using Google Earth and similar. We actually, at one of my schools that I examine at, we have got a full Microsoft Flight Sim package set up with controls and seats and screens and everything, and we do actually use that for students to practice the navigation work cycles before they actually go and do it in the air. So I think there's definitely some value. You can practice some of the checks and some of the work cycles that you're going to use in the air on the home flight simulators. But just be aware they will fly quite differently potentially to the actual aircraft, and the setup of the different speeds may be different. So they are good, but just use them with a little bit of caveats, I would say. Dave, I don't know if you use them in your school at all.
Yes, we do. I absolutely love simulators. We've used them right through the Air Force, right through commercial training, and now I've introduced the Microsoft Flight Sim. We've got a helicopter version and a fixed wing version, and up to multi as well. And I find it very useful right from starting up, taxiing out, making the radio calls, and just going through the process, and then flying the takeoff, the circuit. How to level out, for example, those kind of things. You can freeze it and talk about what we mean by the attitude, how we're holding it. It's an absolutely wonderful way. I would only suggest, though, that if you are using it at home, I would highly recommend that you use it after you've had a lesson in a particular area, rather than getting yourself into bad habits. But once you've got it set up, they are very, very useful. Yeah.
Brilliant. Somebody's also asked about are there online websites for practice tests and quizzes and that? Yes, there are a number of schools out there that offer this, and online services as well. You may have seen some of our websites and webinars with Nigel from Easy PPL. That's one company. There are others available out there if you look on Google, or look at what your particular school recommends. There are various ones out there where you can take practice tests and quizzes, and that's a really effective way of studying for the PPL exams, and we do recommend that as well. It's when I did my ATPL exams, I used question banks and that because I found it a very much an effective way of trying to learn, was actually doing practice. I would read the information, certainly in some subjects like MET, and I would just find it, I'd go downstairs for a coffee and it would just disappear out of my brain. So I found actually practicing questions and getting the answers wrong and getting the right next time round was actually a good one there as well. Sky Learner is another system as well. So there's plenty out there. Look through Google or look what is available on your school. Had quite a few questions as well about medicals, which we're actually hoping to run a specific webinar and workshop on medicals later this year, which would be which I think would be really popular. One with the queries. A couple of people have asked about safety pilots and safety pilot limitations. I think what people are referring to here is it is potential that when you get a medical, a class 2 medical for PPL, it can be issued with some kind of safety pilot limitation on there, in that you can only fly with another pilot that's qualified to take controls on type here as well. Now, sometimes people get these safety pilot, or they get various limitations on medicals while they might be waiting for a clearance, or waiting for limitations to be removed, or specialist investigations or reports. So it can be a long-term thing, it can be a short-term thing. And some people are asking questions in the questions about whether they can actually progress through a PPL with a safety pilot limitation on there as well. I believe in the past that there have been issues because you can't complete the solo portion of the course there as well. But I don't know that, for example, I'm not medically qualified myself, so that's something we will take away and go and check with the CAA exactly if you get issued some kind of safety pilot limitation on your medical, or if you think you're going to get one, what does that mean to the ability to complete flight training. We will go away and research that and get an answer. Dave, I don't know if you can add any more to that at this stage. I think it's one we're best to go and check on.
No, I haven't got anything to add on that, Matt. Thanks.
Thanks, good. And somebody's asked, how do you get a medical as well? If you go to the CA website, there is Find an AME. We keep saying AME, and we must explain these abbreviations. It's an aviation medical examiner. They are doctors that specialise in issuing aviation pilot medicals. They're all over the country. Their contact details are on the website, and you would go to them. And for an initial class 2, you might need to take an eye test form that completed by your opticians, and you'll have some fairly comprehensive but pragmatic, practical tests to check things like your heart, breathing, any medications you've got and things there as well, and get issued a medical, and you can get issued it there and then for a class 2 medical there as well. A lot of people think that conditions or issues they've got may prevent them holding a medical, but it's often not the case as well. There are many people that have conditions and problems that quite successfully fly with those as well. You may need some more specialist reports or some specialist tests, but most people do get through and get issued a medical in the end as well. If you want some inspiration, look at Flying Scholarships for Disabled or Airability or some of those other organisations out there, and some people that have been through some pretty life-changing experiences are also flying and learning to fly right now. I think some of them are at Gloucester, aren't they, Dave, as well, I believe? So yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah. We've got a couple that are father and daughter team, both pilots and both AMEs, and we tend to recommend people go to them.
That's it. So they're all around at various airfields, and your schools will probably be able to recommend an AME there as well. And Talif has put the link CAA Find an AME in the chat box there as well. So good luck with that if you're going to do that. And I can say getting a medical and going for a medical as a pilot doesn't get any less stressful or any more enjoyable every year. But it's a fact of life with flying to make sure we're all safe there as well. Daniel Cartwright has asked, once passed, what are some cost-effective methods to gain hours towards a CPL? Dave, some thoughts on this?
Yeah, I would say there are two obvious ones. If you're going for a CPL, you want to make sure your techniques you don't lose good technique. So if you can fly with an instructor that periodically, maybe once a month, that would obviously it counts towards your hours. So it's you still get P1 hours for that. But the other way is to join a share group. We have one at Gloucester, for example, that has 14, it might be 16 now, people in a Cessna 172 share group. Incredibly cheap flying. There are also aircraft with permit aircraft that you can fly and gain hours that are, again, much cheaper to fly. And then, of course, you can share flights with other club members and share the costs, of course. Those are the only ones I'd recommend. There are a few other ways, but to keep the costs down, those would be the best ones. But I would highly recommend flying with an instructor at least once a month to keep your skills up if you're looking to go for a CPL.
And yeah, the whole thing really that I advise with hours building is to make those hours count. Go places, expand your envelope, and that. Don't just burn holes in the sky in your local area. Really try and expand that. And like I say, I've known people like I say share an aircraft and go on a tour all up to Scotland and round from my area of the woods and gain some real valuable experience there as well. The other thing you can consider doing is buying a share in an aircraft. I've known people have brought a share in a permit aircraft, a home built aircraft, to achieve some lower cost flying there as well. And they brought a share for a few years, built their hours, had some good fun flying, and then sold the share on to somebody else doing that as well. So that's also a possibility, and those hours can count towards things as well. We've also got a question about the NPPL, so that's the national PPL, and it's saying, is it going to continue as is under the proposed changes? I think the answer is it depends on which route the CAA go with the licensing simplification. One of the proposals is that the NPPL will certainly be the sort of the base level sub ICAO license. Others that it might get merged and that. So the answer is we're not entirely sure yet as well, but what is pretty clear, I think, is what will happen is there will be a sub ICAO, ICAO being the international standard license. So there'll be a recreational level license, then there will be the PPL, and then commercial. So I think we're going to see some simplifications, whereas at the minute we've got various licenses will all sit at the same kind of level with different names. So will it be called an MPPL in the future? I don't know. Could be, might not be, is the honest answer as well there. Dave, we've had a question as well. Are there any restrictions with flying over water with a PPL? Dave, do you do any much over water flying with your school, or?
Not with the school. I mean, we cross the Bristol Channel. We tend to fly as high as we can. If we're flying anywhere that we can't glide to land, then we would wear life jackets, but not as a rule with the students. We tend to have routes that don't require that. If we fly the heli lanes as part of the post PPL workup, so you're flying down the River Thames, then we wear life jackets for that. And if we're going out to the Channel Islands, then we'll take a dinghy as well.
Yeah, so there's no legal restrictions and so on that as well, but there is requirements on what equipment you have to carry if you're flying outside a gliding range of land, basically. In terms of flying across boundaries and borders with a PPL, you can fly to France, you fly to Jersey, Alderney, and so on like that. The most difficult thing about all of that is the paperwork. There's lots of paperwork and flight plans and General Aviation and Border Force reports and things like that that have to be done. So there's lots of paperwork to be done, but a school or a friendly instructor can always help you through that.
Yeah.
One final question, Lily. Somebody had asked, Ed was asking about equipment to buy. Did you buy any particular equipment before starting to fly or getting into your course, or anything you recommend?
I think the main things I bought, which I still use all the time. So I bought kneeboard first up, was on my list. Diversion plotter, which I've already spoken about. CRP5 or flight computer. Textbooks. What else did I get? There's quite a good if you go onto different like flight equipment websites, they do these sort of like PPL starter packs, and you can get loads of stuff you can buy all as a sort of discounted pack. It gives you everything you need really to get yourself through the PPL course. I think I already had a few little dribs and drabs that I'd got from over the years just whilst I was eagerly waiting to start my PPL. So I didn't get one of those, but I did just fill in the gaps and then ended up with something quite similar. And then I bought my own headset, I think about a year into flying as well, which was good. I got a set of David Clark's. That is it. I think that's all the key things that I use all the time, or that I bought at the time.
Yeah, two top tips from me, and then I'll see what Dave wants to do. Yeah, getting a headset that is comfortable and is a good fit and good sound clarity for you, I think is really important. You don't have to go for a very expensive noise reduction headset straight away. I've got one. It's because I'm getting old and I've spent too much of my life in airplanes and need to protect what hearing I have left. So yes, as instructors, you may see us using them. It's because we're in the aircraft all the time. We need them. A more basic level headset that doesn't cost so much will be fine for you. But one that fits well and you're comfortable with is a really good investment there as well. There is lots of other things that you can spend money on, like flight bags and all sorts of things like that. And my honest advice is, if you need to spend money in terms of bags and things like that, honestly, something from a well-known online shopping retailer or a supermarket, a rucksack, or a little case will be just fine. You don't need specific special things. Same with pens and things like that as well. Anything that you can get in your local stores in the high street are fine for that as well, if you need to save money. But there is some things like the books and plotter and headset that are well worth investing in, is my recommendation. Dave, what do you think as a school?
Yeah, I was just going to say about the books, actually, Matt. Thank you. Obviously I sell all of this stuff as a school, but I also recommend that my students go onto eBay to buy stuff that people may have finished the course and want to sell on. And so I would recommend that they go onto eBay before they buy new, except in the case of books, unless they can guarantee that they're getting the latest version. So be a bit careful. You might get 20-year-old complete set of books, which are largely out of date. So just be a bit careful about that. But certainly things like the nav computer, the flight bags, even headsets. I bought 2 Bose headsets 10 years ago that were at least 10 years old then when I bought them, and they're still working incredibly well. So yeah, you really can get some bargains if you shop well.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, all. So here's some takeaways, and those of you that are watching this video on the replay will also be able to see that as well. So these are the key takeaways, and you'll see some themes in there that keep coming through as well. It's all about preparation, reading ahead, and practice, and those are the real keys there as well. More you can do to practice and prepare before your lessons, before you're flying, it's going to enable you to have a safe and effective flight, and also keep the cost down for you, because you're going to get the most out of learning. That is pretty much the top level summary, but there's some key good points there from what the team have covered. So we hope you've been able to take something away from this evening. As a reminder, if there's anything you'd like to revisit, a replay of this workshop will be sent to you on the post-event email there as well. And there'll also be a list of resources to support you. Don't worry about all of those links. It's really a reference library. You don't have to go away and read it before committing to a course or going to learn to fly. So don't worry about that. It's really just a reference library of links and useful things that you may need. Once we finish tonight, a survey will pop up in your window. It's really important to us you take time to fill this in. Your feedback is genuinely really valuable to us, and it allows us to modify and improve these on behalf of the CA as we go forward there as well. Keep out for more details of forthcoming workshops, whether you're a student or an experienced pilot or just a retired pilot. We absolutely welcome everybody, and we welcome your input. The engagement tonight, as ever, has been brilliant. We've loved answering your questions. It's great to see some of you are on your student and learning journey already. And myself, Dave, Lily, and the rest of the Astral team wish you all the very best on your aviation journey there as well. There's lots of, lots of help out there as well. Not just us, not just your school, lots of help out there. Use the groups, use some of the associations out there as well, and really enjoy being part of the aviation community is my good advice to you. We've run out of time. It's all remains is to say a big thank you to Dave and Lily for their, it's great to see some of the lived experience as an active instructor and school owner, and somebody who's recently been through the PPL journey. So thank you both as well. And Talifer has been working hard, intensely in the background, making sure all of the IT comes together and keeping all of us on track, which is great. So thank you all. We look forward to seeing you hopefully at some future workshops. And if you see any of us around flying schools or airfields, come and say hi to us and meet us in person. We'd be delighted to chat if you see us around as well. But thank you all. Take care and have a good evening.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, everyone.